Okay, so I was out in Monterey, alright? And I was already pretty wasted. I was a fifth of Jack in, which means I was already drunk. I don't drink Jack sober. I hate Jack Daniels.
Okay.
So I walk up to this table, up at the PX, and there's these like 4 or 5 seamen. And they're taking semen. It's because they're gay. And they're sitting there and they're taking shots of Everclear, and it's half Everclear, half cranberry juice.
Right.
And I'm sitting there and I'm looking at them, I'm watching them. They go around a couple of times and they're acting like they're having a grand old time. So I walk up to the table, I grab the bottle out of the hands of one of them. And I look at them and I'm like, you guys are fucking pussies. I'm already fucking wasted. If I were sober, this would not have happened. Because I'll fully admit I am not that daring sober. And so I just walk off and I'm drinking this bottle of Everclear like it's water. This is the night I woke up in the tank on post, like an old Soviet T-34.
So not like a drunk tank.
Not a drunk tank, like
an actual tank.
A very, very inebriated tank.
They actually had to, they actually welded the tank shut. You can't get into the tank now. Because drunk people would get into the tank and throw up inside.
And then they'd have to send somebody out to clean puke out of a
tank
that sits in the sun.
Yeah. Imagine, if you will, a giant sardine can in the California sun full of drunk vomit. Yeah. Welcome to RightCast, everybody. This is
And that is, I think, really what that shows, that you were just entirely too gangster for the Air Force.
Oh,
you should
dude,
join the Army.
Definitely.
Oh yeah, no, if you were in the Army, you'd have got a medal.
Oh, yeah.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is RightCast Radio, because the left one's broken. Welcome again, and thank you for joining us this week. I am your host. They call me the Jackrabbit. With me is the co-founder of Right Chan.
Caedes.
And
Cobra.
And
Coffeepot.
And we are here to discuss things for your pleasure.
I don't want to discuss your pleasure.
Damn it. I thought that would work.
Can we discuss my pleasure?
No, absolutely not.
All right, guys. So I think we figured out the topic for tonight. We're actually going to go around because it occurs to me that we actually haven't sat down and really discussed what your ideal system of government is. Like what you would ideally wish to be. And I think just to make it fun and to add a little bit to it, tell us all in turn what your ideal system of government is and also what you'd be willing to settle for in your perfect world. I think we could start with Coffeepot. How about you?
All right. Well, I tend to be a libertarian in my viewpoints. Register Republican simply to vote in the primaries, but anyway, not sure why I threw that out there. But anyway, I believe in a very limited form of government. I think people should be allowed to do pretty much whatever they want to do so long as it does not hurt anyone else. Not only that, I think the state governments should have most all the authority and most all the authority over their individuals, as I think state governments have more of an idea as what's going on within their borders as opposed to a federal government. I think the federal government should simply be there to negotiate trade deals between nation states and as like a night watchman style of government where essentially their job is simply to deal with the other nation states.
But who watches the Watchmen?
Me.
Your mom.
Wah wah. So, okay.
So, but basically limited government is what I'm, and I'll be honest with you, I haven't really done a very in-depth study into government, but looking at it, just coming at this from
like a layman's.
Yeah, like a layman's perspective. To me, it seems like that would be the best situation because, frankly, when I get up in the morning, I go to work and I come home, I don't want to be told that I have to wear my seatbelt on the way home. I don't want to be told, I don't want to live in a nanny state where I'm told that you do this, you do that, I want to be left alone for the most part. If I want to build something on my property, I don't want to go have to register and pay for permits to build a barn.
Yeah.
It should be my business whether or not that barn is stable or not. And if I risk my family inside a house that I built, that's my business.
Barn. Stable. Farm jokes.
Oh, gosh.
So that's what you would like.
You gonna keep those chickens in your libertarian barn? Cook, 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 cook.
Oh, gosh.
So what? Wow.
No, see, that's just it. If you come in here and you start to force me to bake you a gay wedding cake, that's not going to happen.
No, he'll just shoot you with his recreational nukes.
Exactly. So what do we have for record? All right, so that's what you want. What would you be willing to settle for?
I do believe in a moral system of government. And as far as something to settle for, oh, man.
Honestly, I don't think a loose confederation of states is too much to ask for.
Yeah, honestly, to be honest with you, I would be willing to settle for that. If it ended up with a large amount of liberty, and if people were able to make their own rules according to what that individual area believed in,
okay,
I have no problem with that. I get a little iffy when it comes to putting a lot of power in the hands of a legislative branch.
Okay. All right, so now we're going to move to Cobra.
You're just jelly, bro.
So what color are your lasers?
We definitely use the blue lasers.
All right.
Okay, so I am ideally an ethno-national distributist clerico-fascist.
Okay, cool. Would you like to add any more spells to that?
In other words,
this D&D game.
Yeah, word salad.
I believe that birds of a feather flock together, as I think was made reasonably clear last week. Governmental regions should be split up along cultural and ethnic guidelines.
Okay.
So that the majority of people within a region essentially agree on what their values are. I believe that distributism is I believe in distributism. If you're not familiar with distributism, it's a Catholic ideology that was brought forward that breaks society down into not individuals but families, where families own businesses together and run family businesses, and that a family who works has a right to own the land upon which they work. So, for instance, you don't have corporate farms that are owned by a board of trustees.
No agribusiness.
Yeah, a farmer owns his own land, because the most basic human right is the right to eat, and the right to produce your own food. As far as fascism goes, I believe in a guild system for businesses where people who engage in like businesses come together under guilds which answer to the state. So they answer to the state to be regulated. Within the guild, they agree on self-regulations, but individual businesses are also reasonably free to enact their own policies. I also believe that there should be a strong one-party sort of federal government, which represents a united, a culturally and ethnically united people, that makes laws on their behalf by their consent. But at a sort of state or local level, you still have elections Each individual doesn't vote in said elections, but rather the patriarch of a family, which, based on the previous economic model, would also be business owners vote in local elections. And then politicians at the state and local level are then, or who perform well and have, high approval ratings and such, are then appointed by the party to higher governmental standards. So a loser isn't elected to the presidency just because he speaks well. His track record is reviewed by a governmental body, and only those who actually perform advance through government. So in that way, it's still sort of democratic, because only people who were originally elected will advance, but their advancement isn't based on their elections, it's based on their performance. As far as what I'm willing to settle for, I'm willing to settle for total war. No, I'm just kidding. Sort of like Coffeepot, I'd be willing to settle for like a loose confederation of states where state governments represent their constituents. And where, like, for instance, in America, the federal government has a really hard time legislating because they're trying to legislate for wildly different people groups and trying to make blanket laws which make everyone happy.
You're not going to do that, though.
It's impossible.
It just doesn't work. So, like Coffeepot said, I would like to put all the legislative power back into the hands of the states so that only laws that are good for local populations get passed.
All right. Caedes.
Yes.
Spark out.
All right. Finally, my turn. I'm gonna put these plebes in their place. My views are actually not all that dissimilar from Cobra's, but I'm considerably more hardline. I am first and foremost a fascist. I want a one-party state led by to be perfectly blunt, a strong man who knows what needs to be accomplished and who's willing to do anything to accomplish those things. I want a syndicalist economy. Businesses are owned by the workers. So the business itself is simultaneously its own board and its own labor union. Those businesses are then in turn organized into syndicates, which represent an industry, which negotiates for favorable terms with the state. The state, however, would have the final say-so that the economic machine could be directed into, say, war effort or economic stimulus, things like that. So ultimately, the workers can't be exploited by their employers because they are their employers. And the businesses are reasonably free to do what they need to do to take care of their workers, but can also be directed toward the greater good of the nation, essentially.
Now, if I'm not mistaken, how that works is whenever the state needs something like wartime production, they put in a contract to the relevant syndicate.
Yes.
And then within that syndicate, only the businesses that actually bid on or accept that contract have to do it.
It's kind of on a more voluntold basis. You have to. There is officially a bid that goes in, but because the economic machine is being poured into one effort.
Well, what I'm trying to communicate is essentially that the state gives the relevant guild a quota, and as long as the guild meets its quota, or as long as the syndicate meets its quota, the state is happy with that.
More or less. It would actually be an economic.
But if any individual company within that syndicate doesn't pull their weight towards that contract, it's the syndicate's responsibility to.
Yes, there would of course be repercussions if the syndicate were unable to meet that, because for instance, in the case of war, you get all the manufacturing plants, all the vehicle manufacturers together. They need to make tanks. They need to make things like Humvees and APCs and whatnot. If they're not meeting their quota, the war effort suffers.
Yeah,
and that is bad.
They don't care who's making the tanks specifically.
As long as they get made, essentially.
And if any individual company within says, well, we don't want to make tanks, and the syndicate fails to meet their quota because of that, it's the syndicate's responsibility to tell that business to pull their weight or die.
Essentially. On that same note, such a state would not wage war unnecessarily. I believe in a system in which things, for instance, foreign policy would be approached from a standpoint of mutual respect. You don't go and wage war for no reason. If you're attacked, wage war. Or if you just really, really need that sweet, sweet clay, the concerns of other nations come secondary, but you don't trample them unless you have to, essentially. On a more social level, I don't care what people do in their homes. Just don't do it in public. If you're gay, be gay all you want, behind closed doors. I don't want to see it. Kids don't need to see it. Socially, I'm fairly conservative, but I also recognize that you cannot control what people do in their homes and still do everything else the state needs to do effectively. I believe that, for instance, currency should be backed by something with intrinsic value. I believe we were discussing the uranium standard earlier, which I think is a beautiful idea. Back your currency with military might and electricity. You can't fail. What I'd be willing to settle for? That's an interesting question, because ideally I don't want to settle.
Well, that's the whole point of it's the thought experiment. Of course, that's the whole point. Nobody wants to settle.
If I had to settle, if the revolutionary struggle were somehow stymied, if I absolutely had to, if I had to play along with something, I'd be okay with an absolute monarchy. No, realistically, if I absolutely had to settle, my fallback would be kind of a national anarchist system in which basically the government breaks down entirely and we go back to sort of a tribalist state in which people band together along cultural, religious, and ethnic lines to look out for the interests of their own community beyond anything else. That I'd be willing to settle for the complete collapse of society and essentially a return to the Bronze Age. I'm unreasonable. I know it.
All right. Oh, can you hear that, guys?
Just Jackrabbit's time.
No, it's our subscriber count slowly dropping.
We have subscribers?
Yeah. No, not anymore. No,
Don't worry, I'll conscript some.
Oh my god. All right, my ideal governmental system would have to be a constitutional monarchy in its truest form. What Britain has doesn't count because it's not real.
That is very true.
Well, Parliament has all the power.
Yeah, like their monarch is a figurehead.
Right.
The ideal that I would have would be a constitutional monarchy where the statecraft, war, peace, talks, trade, these things are all handled by a monarch. Somebody who's been raised in it from their birth. Somebody who's been taught from their birth, this is how you deal with people. This is how statecraft works. This is how you sit at you literally have someone who was raised and groomed to be the CEO of a country is basically what that would end up being. A true monarch, somebody who's been raised under the cultural ideas of you have to be everything that your nation is. When you get angry, you have to be righteously flip tables enraged. when you're happy, you have to be the happiest you could possibly be because you reflect the nature of your people. The idea that you are bigger than life. That's the monarchist side of it.
You must be Alexander the Great.
Yeah, ideally. Yeah, in a form of speaking, yeah. But the constitutional side of it would be would stymie the powers of this absolute monarch to a considerable degree when it comes to social aspects. First of all, I think there should be a military unit, whether we consider it something like the National Guard or something to that effect, that is by law required to keep up with the state military, technologically and also as far as training goes. If the Imperial Army gets fighter jets, the citizens also get fighter jets. If the Imperial Army gets tanks, the citizens also get tanks. And the idea being that these two, and never the twain shall meet. Like it would be in my perfect world, it would be illegal for heads of like militias or whatever you want to call them, militias, National Guard, whatever. It would be illegal for them to have any contact whatsoever with the monarch, except in places where it would be absolutely required. And in that scenario, they would have to be able to talk, of course. But in that scenario, because ideally you would never want to get into a war that the Imperial Army couldn't handle.
Yeah.
Because that's not what the National Guard's job is.
Yeah.
Their job would be specifically to protect the constitutional rights of the people. And the Constitution being very similar to the one that we had in the beginning of the Founding Fathers, the right to free speech, the right to...
Essentially the Bill of Rights.
Yeah, the Bill of Rights. You would have a very strong Bill of Rights with...
And then a sort of folk militia to act as a sword hanging over the head of the king.
Exactly.
If he decides that he wants to violate those
exactly.
rights.
So if they start trying to pull fucky shit, like the monarch pulls out his big feathery pen and says, "Guns are bad." Well, now the militia and the generals of each militia are like, okay, see, we have a problem with that because you're limiting our ability.
Yeah.
That was, I think, the original Second Amendment actually covered things like cannons and actual military.
But they didn't catch up with the it didn't
Right.
keep up with the times, which is the problem. And I think that today in today's world, especially in the U.S., if the citizenry had been able to keep up with the federal government's technology and weapons tech, we'd be living in a very different United States today.
And this might come as a surprise, but I actually agree with you very much on that. Benito Mussolini once said that the function of a soldier and a citizen is inseparable. The citizen must, to a certain degree, be a soldier. He must be willing to fight and potentially die for his country.
Right. So it's a rather delicate balance.
Yeah.
Because you have two effectively two armies in one nation state. However, I think that delicate balance could be held very easily because the minute a king starts fucking up, the people are going to hate him. And when the people hate him, if you have the might of these generals and stuff behind you, it would, in a way, it would work itself out because you would have these generals and these people in positions of authority within this. Because ideally, it would be two completely separate.
Yeah.
And there would be no hopping. Like if you're in the Imperial Army, that's what you pick. That's the chain you go up. That is where you go up, and that is, the only time generals from the Imperial Army and generals from the National Militia would meet is if they ever jumped into something they couldn't fucking handle.
Yeah.
Which in the world of nukes is not really. It doesn't really seem like it would be that realistic because if you had something like what's happening in the U.S. today, where we're going to war in countries that don't. Why? We're having these needless wars that happen. Well, in this scenario that I've created, if the king came down to the National Guard generals and said, "Hey, I need so many troops," they'd be like, "No, that's not our job. If you can't do it with the Imperial Army, you shouldn't have tried to do it."
Yeah.
Because it's really funny. People think if you're a military superpower, you can handle anything. Mm. And you probably have a little bit more authority on this than I do. No, you definitely have more authority on this than I do, Jackrabbit. Iraq and Afghanistan have shown that a third world, not even army, but conglomeration of goat herding, nobodies in the middle of the desert can stymie a first world military for a decade.
No, of course, because it's not a traditional war.
Yeah, and a lot of people don't realize that. People think, why haven't we won yet?
Because when you get down to wars like this, yeah, I'll run down this rabbit trail. This is fun. When you get into wars like that, the problem is you're attacking an idea. And the only way to defeat an idea is complete genocide.
You have to kill everyone who holds it.
Or not playing.
Yeah.
Like, the only way to win is to either not play or kill everyone.
And there's a danger in not playing.
The only way to really end that would be to bomb the ever-living fuck out of every city that every major city exists there. Get every soldier to march online with fucking full rounds and make a beeline across the fucking desert.
I have actually supported the idea of putting out a statement. Hey, stop this bullshit, or we're gonna put a tactical nuke on Mecca.
Yeah, that would probably do it as well.
They put their religion absolutely first.
Yeah.
Everything else is secondary.
That's the issue with that. But getting back to what I was talking about, I feel like that would be a perfect, to me anyway, I think that would be a perfect system of government. There's just enough checks and balances where you have that strong, almost mythical style of leader that, he is above, where, everybody's like, oh man, you have a team captain, basically. Something that everybody can look to. He's just this amazing,
he's a paragon of your people.
Using the Warhammer 40K joke that everybody uses all the time, the God Emperor. That's exactly what you have, because you have somebody that's so out of the public eye and is such a he becomes a man shrouded in mystery simply by existing. So he's a paragon of the Empire. He's a strong leader, and everybody loves him. But if he steps out of line, there are consequences, and there will be. And there's enough checks and balances there, especially if you keep them split enough. Like the idea that the king should never be able to even talk to these generals unless there was a war effort going on that, like the country was getting invaded.
Yeah.
Or if, but he should never be able to, he should not be able to bestow lands, titles, money of any form and any style to these men. You can't stop corruption from happening, but you can definitely stymie it.
Yeah, he shouldn't be able to bribe his own check and balance.
Yeah. And you would also have to add to that, it would be helpful to create a almost like I don't want to say Inquisition because that has its own connotations to it, but in effect an Inquisition, a group that, in the very truest sense of the word, someone who inquires, an inquisitor. So you would have a group of 5 people that would come in and check on these generals every so often and find out what they're doing. Like, hey...
An oversight committee.
Basically an oversight committee.
Well, with a much better title, of course.
Right. Prettier hats, too. A lot of feathers. But,
nobody will expect it.
Yeah, nobody ever expects it. Nobody ever expects the oversight committee. That's my ideal system of government. It's very grandiose and it's very never going to happen, because in order for that to happen, that would require somebody with enough power to take a parcel of land or take over a system of government and put this into play. And that requires people giving up power voluntarily at the very beginning, which is very unlikely to happen. As a matter of fact, that's why the U.S. was such a crazy thing when it was created. The idea that George Washington gave up that power was mind-boggling, and most people wouldn't do it. So it's a very far-fetched idea, but that would be my ideal system. What I would settle for, I like Coffeepot's idea. Do what you want, keep it out of my house.
I think in the end we're all willing to settle for Coffeepot's idea.
Yeah, well, because Coffeepot's idea isn't inherently terrible. It's just...
It's America light.
Yeah.
What we all have a problem with is America heavy.
Yeah,
we can all live with America
it's slim
light.
America.
The government needs to go on a diet.
Yeah. So that ideally, but so now that we've kind of set that up, this has been RightCast. No, I'm just kidding. So let's talk about these ideas a little bit. Let's start. Who wants to? Okay.
Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
Cobra interrupting.
Take it.
I really like your vision of the monarch. Fascism has something pretty similar. The movie Look Who's Back.
Actually, it's interesting. The idea, it's actually not all that dissimilar from and I hate to use the German terminology here because I'm actually quite aggravated by National Socialism. There's a lot of things about it that bug the hell out of me. Mm-hmm. But it's the idea of the Führer principle. It's the idea that there is a leader and this leader is absolute and he's He is everything. He is the state embodied.
He's larger than life, but he's also meant to be the personification of his people.
Yeah.
And if at any point, the actor playing Hitler in the movie Look Who's Back specifically states, if at any point the Fuhrer stops representing his people and starts representing himself, it is the people's duty to put him down. Because the Fuhrer is the people. And somebody who isn't the people cannot occupy that space.
It's actually interesting. Benito Mussolini once spoke of fascism as inherently more democratic than democracy, because the whole idea of the fascist state is to be the physical representation on the world stage of the people of its nation. And if that state no longer represents the will of the people, then the people should tear it down and install a new one.
What could be more democratic than everyone in the country largely agreeing on most things? America's problem with this two-party system we have is that we're split down the middle 50-50 on almost everything.
Yeah, division is inherent to our system. We are divided and at each other's throats by design.
How democratic is it for half the people to be pissed off all the time?
Well, not only that, you also get into that part where it is a two-party system and other parties are discouraged from even showing up, ideally. You know, like you have a Libertarian Party or any other smaller party that wants to start a movement, they can't. Yep. They're not allowed on the ticket by
I think
they have to run as independents, which pulls their teeth.
Yeah, I think here in our home state to actually form a political party by law, you have to have gotten at least I think it's 2% of the popular vote in the last gubernatorial election, which comes out to something like 100,000 people. There aren't even 100,000 people in our metropolitan area.
Yeah.
If we got all of our local area to vote for a party, we wouldn't be able to get our name on a ballot.
And that's the inherent problem with the system we have. It's self-sustaining, as all government is.
It's designed to keep itself functioning, and what the people actually want or need is entirely secondary. And that is I believe an inherently flawed system of government, because without the people, what good is the government?
Now, correct me if I'm wrong. Wasn't it originally discouraged to have a two-party system in the Constitution, or was it...
The Constitution actually doesn't make any mention of how many parties we should have.
Right, but politically, it seems like...
We used to have dozens of parties. We used to be just like other countries nowadays. Like Israel has something like 52 major political parties.
Right.
Germany has 4 or 5 or so. There were 5 running in the French elections recently.
Yeah.
There are only 2 running now, and soon there will be only 1.
Marine Le Pen.
I'm so happy for Le Pen right now.
Vive la France.
Wait, what's going on?
She's winning.
She's winning.
Okay.
Hard.
All right.
So
it's weird. It's almost like people don't want to have Muslims run into.
Yeah, I know, right?
It's almost like Westerners with one particular set of values don't want a bunch of screaming goat fucking savages in their country.
Well, I don't think so much that. I don't think it's so much that. I just think we just don't want to be blown up.
Well, I mean, it's funny when you actually look at the breakdown of the people coming into Europe right now. Like, oh, it's refugees, it's women and children. No, it's not.
No, it's not. It's mostly men.
It's
That's the thing. Fighting age men.
It's 60% men, mostly between the ages of 18 and 34, which I believe is almost exactly the Army's recruiting range.
Yep.
It's not refugees, it's an invasion.
Oh, yeah, well, and that's...
And the French are starting to wake up to this.
Yeah, well, and I'd like to point this out. I think honestly, I believe it's by design, because how do you cripple a nation's culture and a nation's identity? You do that by flooding it with a different culture. If that culture is violent to the culture that's already existing, all the better.
The more aggressive culture will win.
Right.
And Western culture has... We here in the West have been largely emasculated. Mm-hmm. The heroic virtues we used to display are now demonized.
Of course they are.
Right, and that's why I think it's so important.
And even the ones that are still held in high regard are discouraged as being unrealistic.
Well, they're watered down beyond the point where they'd be useful.
Yeah, that's why I think it's so important. I think even groups, something as small as neo-masculinity, why that is so important is because it has such an impact on the cultural levels and on every level, be it business, be it in government, be it wherever it is. It has an impact for the better, and that's a culture. I think is defined mostly by its beliefs, and if in those set of beliefs, men are allowed to act in a masculine manner, and they're allowed to act in a repeating myself, in a masculine manner, you're going to see a lot of that go away. Like a case in point, in where I live, if a Muslim refugee raped a woman, I speak English. If a Muslim refugee were to rape a woman, chances are her entire family would probably go in and kick that guy's door down and kill him.
There's no doubt about it.
That's Southern justice. I mean, that's if you had that happening in Europe on a large enough scale, I don't think they'd want to come over.
No. But we have this idea that our society should be open, and to keep out different people is somehow racist.
No, it's not
they
at all.
have an entire region of the world to behead people and blow things up.
I think Bill Carson also actually talked to a lot of the refugees, and most of them said, we want to go home. We don't want to leave Syria. So, kind of raises an eyebrow for me, like, okay, so why don't we just let Syria be Syria, leave them alone, let Russia deal with them, and then just get out of the situation?
Well, and the big thing is, Syria's not all that bad if you're in the Syrian government controlled areas.
Right.
You look at actually recently, Palm Sunday, you had bombings in Egypt, which is a peaceful, largely, it's a modern democracy. It has peace and acceptance. 34 people blown up in churches on Palm Sunday in Egypt.
Right.
Palm Sunday in Syria, Christians went about their business completely unmolested. No bombings, no killings. We don't even have that here in the West anymore.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you had it was Jacques Hamel, the priest in France, who was beheaded while he was saying the mass. That's insane.
Yeah.
That's when we should have woken up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, and I think you are seeing people that are waking up. Case in point, what's happening in France right now. It's the question that I have is it big enough? You're seeing a lot of right-wing political ideas, and ideas that are as different from each other as is the left from the right is in some cases. But we're realizing, hold on, this is an existential crisis we're dealing with. If we don't fix this now, our children and grandchildren will pay the price for that. And the question I have, though, is will it be enough in the long run? And that's a little concerning to me.
Well, if we had a king, or, again, I hate to use the term Führer, that wouldn't be an issue because...
You just use the English, leader.
Yeah.
if we had a king or a leader, he would see his people killed in their own homes and places of worship, and he would mete out righteous justice. But instead, we're led by committees, and a committee is first and foremost going to think about, well, what can we afford?
Well, is it that so much, or is it the pay-to-win situation? Case in point, like what was going on with, with the Clinton Foundation and all that shenanigans, where they got in there and they figured out people were paying for positions of power.
I actually don't even believe politicians should be allowed to run companies or charitable organizations.
Right. I don't.
Government should be your job. That should be your.
I don't entirely disagree.
I also believe that politicians should only get paid the median income for the.
Well, yeah, because it should be a service, not a. It should be a servant, not a master in that position.
Yeah, Coffeepot was talking about this last week, how taking a government position should be a civil service.
Mm-hmm.
Only if we didn't make it profitable to be in government, if being government only assured you average in terms of economic standing, only people who actually wanted to change things for the better would try.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, not necessarily for the better, but people who wanted to change things would try. There is still that opening for somebody who had a political agenda.
Well, think about
if they're trying to change things, it's because at least they believe it would be for the better.
Right.
Yeah. Because in a system where politicians only get paid the average of what their constituents get paid, you're not getting into it for the money. Because that would mean the president, for instance, would only make, what, $50,000 a year?
Something like that.
An eighth of what he makes now.
Right. Mm-hmm. Oh, shoot. The sheer fact that you have to be a millionaire to run for a presidential office is a messed up situation.
Yeah.
I mean, I think back in the day...
there's actually I was looking at it because I actually I have some political aspirations.
Yeah.
But there is a minimum amount of money you have to be able to spend to get on the ballot for president.
Well, shoot, it used to be that you didn't even campaign back in the day.
Yeah.
You know, that was, you just put your name on the ballot, and then people looked at the ballot who was on there, and, oh, okay, I see, you know, George Washington's on the ballot, so let's vote for him. You know, I like him. You know?
Yeah. It was still kind of a broken popularity contest,
right?
But it wasn't about who had the most money. It was
right. It
opened
the doors a bit, you know.
Yeah.
Well, it's interesting you talk about the presidency and such, because ideally this movement doesn't live or die by Donald Trump or anybody else.
Right. It's not about him.
Leaders will come and go.
Everybody seems to think that Donald Trump is this like wild card that just showed up out of nowhere and like just stole the hearts and minds of the masses.
Well, Donald
that's
Trump,
not what happened.
Yeah, Donald Trump was a hammer looking for a nail. I think that's kind of the...
You know, it was one of those scenarios where he was the outcome, not the cause.
Yeah.
Donald Trump didn't do this. He didn't create this need. He didn't create the desire to start this podcast or the website.
Yeah.
He didn't create the ideas that are floating around on Poll and other places. You know, these were ours.
Yeah.
These were the citizens, the citizenry. These were our ideas. We started talking about this because we saw things happening and it was fucking broken. And we started seeing the left get crazier and crazier and crazier, and the GOP doing nothing and doing nothing doing nothing. Yeah. And so it's almost, I almost see these political movements, including the one that we're doing, I almost see them as a necessary overreaction.
Yeah.
Because ideally, I would really like to be a center. I used to be center when I was younger, and even up until recently, I tend to be more of a centrist. You know, I like things to be right, and I like things to be mostly conservative, but I had a few liberal ideas that I really liked and subscribed to. Yeah. I can't be a centrist anymore. It's impossible.
Because here's the thing. The left has pushed and pushed and pushed and pushed, and what happens is they'll push an ideal to a certain point until they encounter resistance, then they'll stop for a while, and then they'll leave it there, and then they'll push again to get it a little bit further, and then when they get resistance, they'll stop for a while. I think this backlash is essentially trying to do the opposite, where they're trying to push the ideal in the other direction. And that's what we need to do, because frankly, everything has shifted left.
And there's actually something interesting, because I was thinking about something earlier. I think this right wing push is going to gain. I don't think we've run out of momentum yet. I don't think we're close. Because if you pay attention to what's going on, for instance, with the Democratic National Convention, they've started that purity spiral.
Right.
They recently announced that if you don't toe the party line, you are not a Democrat. You cannot run as a Democrat. If you are not pro-abortion, you're not a Democrat. If you're not, if you don't want to bring in refugees, you're not a Democrat. All this other stuff. Once a political movement begins to purity spiral, it's dying. My ideas, what I want for the future, is pretty extreme. And I am absolutely dead set on that, but I am willing to work with other people, with other ideas, to progress that. And right now, the left is not willing to do that.
No.
The left is willing to sacrifice itself and eat itself alive.
Well, you see that, even going back to this, because this is actually very interesting. I was going to use this anyway, I was going to talk about this. Same thing with Jewish Antifa, the group we tried to reach out to.
Yeah.
This was not an attack, and to the listeners that are here, it never was intended to be an attack. The intent of reaching out to them was to discuss ideas, so we're not in an echo chamber. The four of us have we're all conservative, but we have fairly radically different ideas.
Yeah.
Your ideas fucking scare me, Caedes. I'll be honest. I don't like, the world you paint is not a world I want to live in.
Yeah,
and if I were in it, I would fight it tooth and nail.
Just so you know, as soon as we finish off the communists, we're coming for you next.
Yeah. Like, the worlds you create and the worlds you have described terrifies me. and I would fight it to the
No,
last breath.
to be fair, I also haven't described in great detail a lot of things.
Fair enough, but
because there are things I am perfectly willing to give on.
Well, that's the point I'm getting at, though. Is not necessarily like I'm not attacking you per se. It was just a good point of reference. I'm not necessarily behind most of your guys' ideas on I'm not on the train, you know, like I'm not on board with everything.
Yeah, that's fine.
But that's the idea. That I mean, I think that's why we picked the four of us, because we don't exactly agree, and this is a good conversation. However, we all toe a line of some kind, otherwise we wouldn't be sitting around a table talking about the same stuff.
Hey, better dead than red.
We have commonalities that we're willing to work with together.
The idea that I had when I asked if you would reach out to this group was that, well, let's see if we can talk to them and see if there's any common ground, if there's any way to reach any kind of consensus, any kind of group.
And I think there is. Like, I think all three of us, or all four of us, sorry, I keep accidentally discounting Coffeepot. All four of us, I think, all pretty much agree that the people who work in businesses should determine the direction a business goes.
Right.
We shouldn't have CEOs out to pad their own wallets. Work is a right. People need to be able to feed themselves. We have the right to work. And we shouldn't let the CEO of Enron drive the company into the ground and leave all of us starving. Mm-hmm. We should make the decisions for our own workplace.
Yeah,
and to a certain degree, to a certain extent, I agree with that. There's other stuff that we can get into later that's not quite as...
That's entirely... That could be an entire podcast by itself.
Yeah, that by itself is an entire podcast. However...
But that's something we could talk to the communists about.
Right, but my idea with that, with the Jewish Antifa, is the fact that they weren't even willing to dignify the reach out with a fucking response. They wouldn't even reach out and say no, which is very fucking telling. Because this is how, unfortunately, when it comes to a culture war, which we're in it. Like, I'm not going to say we're getting there, we're there. We're fucking there. People are throwing Molotovs on the street. We're in a culture war. This is what happens. This is what fucking happens when you don't talk, when you don't reach out. And they're the fucking ones doing it, not us. So yeah, we're right wing and we might have all this other stuff, but we're not the ones fucking doing this.
Yeah.
So when it comes down to that, when I'm forced against a fucking wall, I'm gonna fight with the fascists.
Right.
Because I'm not gonna fucking die.
Right, because at that point, the enemy of my enemy is my friend.
Exactly, because at that point, now we have a common shared enemy, and I'm not willing to fucking die so my daughter can be raped when you're fucking migrants. I will fucking have it. Fuck you. I will wade through their fucking blood if I have to before that happens.
Well, shoot, and I've said this before. If protesting the rape of a 9-year-old child by Muslim refugees makes me a Nazi, then you know what? Heil Hitler. I mean, that's... let's be honest here.
Absolutely none of your beliefs are fascist in any way.
No, not at all. In fact, I absolutely hate the idea of an authoritarian government. But if you're going to call me that, okay, buddy, I'll say that. I'll go along with it. You know?
Mm-hmm. And I feel very strongly about this because I've seen this shit firsthand.
Yeah.
I've been in the Middle East. I've seen the reality of this. Mm-hmm. You know, the people that are mostly in America and most of these stupid fucks in the left that are running around like this, they have no fucking idea what they're asking for. They don't know what they're looking at. And I've seen it. I've seen it firsthand, and it's terrifying.
Well, I think that's largely because they tend to run on a mindset of wouldn't it be nice if. And that's...
They're terminal idealists.
Right. And that's... You cannot be an idealist when it comes to governments. When it comes down to it, a government is a tribe. It's a very large tribe, and you have to approach that with a tribalist mindset. You take care of the tribe first. Mm-hmm. And then if you have a little bit extra grain and the other neighboring tribe is starving, then you help them. Yeah. But if you don't have the resources to help them, you don't help them. Or if they're if they're out to kill your tribe, you don't help them. You know what I mean?
You kill them.
Yeah.
If somebody tries to kill the members of your tribe,
you kill them back.
Wipe them the fuck out.
Right. Exactly. And it goes down to the idea is if there is no conversation, if a conversation cannot happen, if people will not talk.
Right. What can you do at that point?
You have forced me to fight.
Yeah. Because
you won't listen, you won't talk, you won't exchange ideas. And that is the terminal failing of the left. They will not talk, they will not exchange ideas. They shriek and they point and they scream and they refuse to have a conversation. And that's where the real problem lies. And if I can find a group that will have a conversation, I will welcome them to my table in my house with open arms. I may not agree with you, but I am totally fine with that. As long as we can have a conversation about it.
Right. I mean,
and I'm perfectly willing to admit that I actually like all of you guys' ideas.
Yeah.
They're ideas that I at one point held myself. But, we all have different life experiences, and they take us into... I fully believe that we all probably started out with a very similar kind of libertarian mindset.
Oh, I used to be liberal. When I was younger, I was very liberal.
I voted Ron Paul in 2 elections and became an anarcho-capitalist.
I voted for Ron Paul in 2 elections and leaned left when I was younger.
Yeah.
More so than I do today.
Yeah.
And over time, I think your political views tend to change somewhat. You probably... I'd say the idea that you grow up with is typically the one you tend to hold unless there's a major change. But I think you will shift from point to point throughout your lifetime.
Well, and I think one of the largest indicators of, like, typically at least in my experience, people's political views shift in response to negative stimulus. Mm-hmm. And I think whether you lean left or right depends on who you're more focused on.
Right.
We're all right-wing because we're looking at other cultures and seeing their negative aspects.
Right.
People tend to lean left because they're looking at all of the bad things we do.
Right.
That's something to... The bad things we do are something to solve after we're no longer in danger of extinction.
Well, and here's the thing. Every culture and every government, everything and everybody has black marks on their records.
Yeah.
I mean, the United States has plenty in its history, But that doesn't mean you throw out the entire ideology just because there's a few black marks back there,
Yeah.
We don't... Here's the thing. Life sucks. I'm sorry. We don't live in a perfect world. You're going to mess up. Nations will mess up. Even moral nations will mess up. And you can't throw out the baby with the bathwater in an effort to, viva a revolution,
Mm-hmm. That actually the reminds me, we're talking about this, the right versus left thing going on here, and the slow, cancerous collapse of the left right now. How do we affect political change? We seem to have hit a point now where the old methods, our election cycle hasn't appeared to really accomplish much of anything.
Yeah, we elected Donald Trump, and what's different?
Yeah, we basically got Clinton anyway.
Yeah.
And I kind of had a suspicion that was going to happen from the beginning.
I was cautiously optimistic.
Yeah, that's...
it was also...
I wanted him to be the real deal. I really did. But
turns out, nope.
the second the missiles landed in Syria, I was done.
Well, it was also never about the man. It's about the...
It was the ideas.
It was and the sending of a message. Like, the left believed Donald Trump to be Hitler. Mm-hmm. A lot of us may or may not have liked Trump, but it's about the message that you think he's Hitler, we would rather vote for Hitler than you.
Well, for me, it wasn't so much that. It was more the case of... voting for Trump, I was more so voting against Hillary.
Yeah, well, that's what everybody was doing this election. Nobody voted for anyone. They voted against the other party.
See, I voted for something. I voted for the idea.
Well, yeah, of course.
I liked the speeches, I liked the ideas, and I wanted those to go mainstream. Mm-hmm. I wanted those ideas in the open being talked about.
Well, I guess in that aspect, mission accomplished. It's being talked
we're
about.
doing it right now.
Yeah.
So as far
as
living
the dream,
as far as the next step, I suppose, in getting these ideas out there, I don't think we're beyond the discussion stage. Yet we're not there yet because enough people
close.
Well, we're very close, but until John the farmer knows what's going on and knows what our platform is and what we discuss, we won't be done.
Right.
And that's the trick, because we are all fairly politically active and politically minded. We enjoy talking about this kind of stuff. We spend literally an hour every week discussing this.
We drive each other nuts discussing this.
Right, but a lot of people don't. The trick is getting the apolitical people aware of what's going on.
Right. You gotta red pill the normies.
Well, and like... Part of a big part of the problem a country like America has is, if you're listening to this from out of country, this term won't make sense to you, but we have Dixiecrats here who disagree with the Democrats on literally everything, but vote Democrat because that's what their daddy did.
I worked with a guy who, on one hand, he would talk to me and said, I don't agree with what them homosexuals are doing. They need to stop doing that. But did you know Trump's a bigot? What?
Do you even know what bigot means? This is actually exactly why I support fascism. The common man is often far too stupid to be involved in the political process.
Well,
Let's
you would
face
actually
it.
be able to. I actually think. Do I have enough time to talk about this? Where are we at on time?
We're at 54 minutes.
I do not have enough time to talk about this. All right.
I mean, we can run long.
Well, okay. Side note on this. I'm going to talk about colleges next week. If everybody's okay with that.
we can
make a note.
Make a note that next week I have an idea that I want to put forth for colleges.
I've got an idea for the week after that.
Yeah. So
Is the idea for the week after that burning colleges?
No.
Now, come on now. We don't want to...
Not all of them.
It's not necessary yet.
Well, I mean, if we just sit around long enough, the left will do it for us.
no kidding. But okay, so that's interesting. It's the idea is, where do we go from here? Because that's the big problem. The issue, the thing that has saved the right, and the thing that has also kind of damned it in a way, is that there's no central idea or theme. What is considered the alt-right? And I guess we are the left considers everyone alt-right, so I guess we'll be alt-right.
The core idea of the alt-right is Western identity.
Right,
It
and
is,
I get that.
it is
that,
white Western European identity. It's
I
the very
understand that,
core
but that
of
is
it.
such a massive. That's such a broad brush.
That encompasses so many different political ideas.
It's kind of
Yeah.
Well, and that's the beauty of it. If we start, as long as we keep that kernel, as long as we go at the end of the day, we are functionally a European nation. We built this country, and we should have the right to our own self-determination. Mm-hmm. As long as we keep that kernel, things like economics don't matter.
Right.
We can cross that bridge when we get to it.
Right.
But at the end of the day, we need to unite to defend the culture
Right now,
our ancestors.
Right now,
built.
we're at an existential crisis. Screw economics right now.
If we don't fight to preserve what our ancestors built, we won't have the luxury of dealing with economics or what gets played on TV later.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
We're facing cultural extinction right now.
Right. And on that, when you do fix the culture, a lot of that, I think, like as far as like the what plays on TV at night, that actually kind of fixes itself in a way.
Yeah. Once you return to the values that made us as great as we are as a cultural bloc, the West. Mm-hmm. Things like tits flashing on primetime TV goes away.
Right.
Late night porn on cable stations goes away.
Well, because Western culture also encompasses pagan groups that see no problem with tits.
It also depends on what kind. There are hyper-traditionalist heathen groups that actually reject things like that as disrespectful to the mothers of the next generation.
Right.
Yeah, but
there
at the same time,
heathens who reject that.
we also have Reconstructionist Greek pagans that are all for orgies. Run it.
Yeah.
Well, and not only that,
they're degenerates.
It's like and I get into this my political and my religious beliefs. They do go hand in hand, but they're also kind of different in a way. Okay, let's say let's pull one out of the air. Let's say somebody likes to watch porn. Okay, as long as as long as you don't put it on the TV and force me to look at it. Okay. Do what you want to do. Religiously, no, dude, you don't do that.
Yeah.
And I think as soon as you reintegrate or you reintroduce those religious concepts and those religious ideas, people will begin to self-regulate.
Yeah. For my views on porn, because evidently we've gotten off on this. We've jumped down this rabbit hole.
Why are we doing this? No, stop. Take us back.
To understand basically where I stand on the issue, I'm going to throw in a shameless plug for the Golden One.
Oh yeah,
his videos on what
would be the second time
the porn question.
Yeah, no, I did watch that and I agree with it.
What is this?
The Golden One is a Swedish, a very very
testosteronous, as he puts it.
The Golden One is a I think his name's actually Felix, isn't it?
Yeah, something like that.
Something like that. So he's He plays a character, and he plays that character very well. The character is very narcissistic, but he himself is not.
No, he's very humble. He's actually, and you wouldn't be able to tell from the size of his fucking pecs.
Yeah.
But he's very well read and very well spoken.
Yeah, he's very well read, well spoken.
His accent's pretty thick. So.
Gigantic gym rat, but his whole thing
so he's
is
like a bodybuilder.
Absolutely, he is, and he talks about he's a nationalist, an ethno-nationalist in Sweden, which puts him in a very precarious position.
Yeah, he does very much have to watch what he says.
Yeah, but he was discussing pornography on one of his most recent videos.
He's actually done it several times.
He has, but he was talking about the idea of treat it like any other addiction, and it's going to be hard the first time, but then because the idea is that anything that you do that.
Well, you build neural pathways.
Well, not only that, we can talk about the brain and all that other stuff, but talking specifically just as a cultural thing, like anything that is a knee-jerk reaction for you, like when you come down from work or you get done, and you're like, well, time to whack off, time to flip on some porn, and you do that without thinking about it, that's a problem.
Yeah.
Same thing with smoking, same thing with smoking, same thing with drinking, same thing with any addiction like that, where you sit down and you don't even think about it, and it weakens you because it does.
Right.
And I'm not going to get into all of this again. This in itself
could be its
a
own
podcast.
Yeah.
But when you get into it, anything like the idea is like if it takes away from you being a disciplined person.
Right. Yeah.
You lose your discipline, which is really the core of it.
Right.
Porn is not the problem. Lack of discipline is the problem.
Right.
The reason porn on cable programming is not the problem. The problem is porn is so necessary to men in today's society that it was put on cable because they wanted it and they were willing to pay for it. Right. That's the problem.
Yeah.
Right.
The problem isn't that it exists.
The problem is that
people are addicted to it and they have to get more of it, and it weakens them. And it weakens men specifically.
It's also a particularly vicious addiction in that it stimulates part of it. It fulfills a need. It fulfills a biological imperative. Essentially, you have a as a man, you have a biological need to shoot baby batter.
Yeah,
that's what you do.
That's probably the most powerful drive we have.
To reproduce.
And you run into that issue with MGTOW and groups like that.
Because
they're cancer. They're
they really are.
They're weak and despicable.
Because these are people who often genuinely believe that women. I've heard them describe women as subhuman.
Yeah.
And you can't build healthy relationships between men and women if you think like that.
No, you can't. And ideally,
men and women are complementary, not opposed.
What they don't understand, and this is the problem that I have with the MRA too. I have these big issues with MRA and this other stuff. It's not women's job.
It's your job
to take, to lead a country or to figure out what's going on. Every problem we have, men did it. And men did it by not caring or letting it slip or allowing this shit to happen.
Well, we shirked our duty as men.
Yeah, we did. Yeah, we shirked our fucking duty.
We weren't stripped of our masculinity.
We let it go.
Yeah.
We are on.
I know, just you and me, man.
And the weirdest part about it is we let it go because we wanted to get laid.
Yeah. How does that work?
But the idea there is, it's our job to take it back. You have to grab your nuts, fucking sack up, and go forth. And that's really, at the end of the day, when you break it down to that core level, that's what's scary about this right-wing movement. It isn't the politics in and of itself. It's the leadership. The leadership that's been lacking for a long time. These people are standing up. They're taking those reins and saying, no, enough is enough. And they're going back. And people are losing their fucking minds because they're not used to this.
Yeah. Right. Well, it's the first time they've encountered any kind of real resistance.
Exactly.
Rear resistance?
Rear resistance.
I speak English.
See, I think the left has encountered rear resistance quite a lot.
Yeah. Excuse me, real resistance.
Right. So, and that's really what it boils down to. Yeah. But I think we're running a little bit over now.
Yeah.
So we'll go ahead and cut this off.
Yeah.
Does anybody else have anything to add before we cut it off for the evening?
I've got a shameless plug for my new website.
New website, huh?
Yep, www.tradfront.org. It actually has the manifesto as an embedded PDF. Tradfront. TRADFRONT.org.
Okay.
There's a little manifesto up there to give you some of my cultural and some of my cultural views. Check it out. See if you like it.
Yeah.
I think there's an application sheet. We're gonna.
Yeah. And we're on YouTube, right?
Yeah.
Is that the only place we're broadcasting right now?
Right now, yes. do have to get the second episode of the podcast up on the website, but we are on YouTube.
Right. All right. Well, in that case, thumbs up, like, subscribe, and if you like what we're doing, share it.
Please subscribe.
Yeah. Please clap.
Or yeah.
If you guys like it, share it. If you hate it, yeah, share it anyway.
I
People yell at us.
I do put forward a motion to change the name of the podcast in order to reflect the powerful movement we're starting here.
I swear to God.
We're going to call it Yeb 2.0.
No, we're not. No, we're not.
We'll win everything.
Guys, this has been Right Chan because the left one's broken. I am your host. They call me the Jackrabbit. With me, as always, are my three wonderful regulars.
Coffeepot.
Cobra.
And Caedes.
Guys, you have a wonderful rest of your week. Stay strong and viva la revolution.